All right, next up in our SEC preview is the Kentucky Wildcats, who kind of finished 2023 the same as 2022, Dalton. They went 7-6, and they lost in their bowl game this time in the Gator Bowl last year. Expectations for this team are around the same, right? Around a 6.5 win total on FanDuel, 7 wins in our projected win total as well, heading into next year. They should have a really, really good defense next year, a really, really good receiving core as well. Some questions, though, obviously, starting with quarterback Brock Vandergriff. We'll get into it in just a second. But I mentioned the biggest strength of this team, man. That is stars at every single level of this defense. They have the third best linebacker unit in the country in our rankings as well, with Jamin Dumas-Johnson there, Derek Jackson, 2 all-SEC guys in the past. A defensive line that has Deone Walker, who's one of the best players in college football, defensive tackle, who we interviewed, by the way, if you check out that interview. And they have a damn good secondary as well, man, led by Maxwell Hairston, their corner, who's a really, really good player. Some other really good players in that secondary as well. So defensively, man, this team is loaded on all 3 levels, really. So I think that's the biggest strength. And then the biggest weakness is kind of the opposite. On offense, outside of the receiving core, a lot of unknowns, because you have a new starting quarterback in Brock Vandergriff who hasn't started in 3 years, even though he's been a 5-star recruit coming out of Georgia. Hasn't played in 3 years at Georgia, really. He's been mostly a backup there. Chip Trainum, new running back there. He has not been a starter in 4 years, coming in from Ohio State. And they do have 4 returning starters on the offensive line, but they were 97th in PFF grade last year on the offensive line. So some big questions on offense outside of the receiving core, which receiving core should be really, really good with Dane Key, Barryon Brown coming back, and Jamori Macklin transferring in as well. But outside of that, there's a lot of uncertainty on this offense, and really a lot of uncertainty at quarterback, Dawn, where you have a highly rated kid coming out of high school in Brock Vandergriff, but we just don't know who he is because he's been on the bench for 3 years now.
Yeah, you watched kind of the sparing amount that he's played, and clearly you can see why he's a 5-star guy. He's got enough arm. He appears to have enough feet to make plays. He can make plays. He looked really good in Georgia's play action stuff when they used that. But you're just looking at the story being the fact that he's got 23 career dropbacks. So it's hard to really take anything. I don't blame Kentucky for taking the gamble on talent. The last 2 years, Will Levis's final season was kind of underwhelming despite him getting picked high in the draft. And last year, Devin Leary just wasn't consistent enough. So they're gambling on talent. He clearly has talent. He's got athletic talent. He's got enough arm to make all the throws. And those receivers, that's a good group of receivers that's going to help him. I really like Barryon Brown, too, in the return game. I think he's big time. But it's a lot of mystery. One of the really, you talk about your quarterback's always your X factor, but that's going to be the biggest X factor is Vandergriff with just a complete lack of experience with 23 career dropbacks and then just getting dropped right into SEC competition full time. It's going to be very interesting to see where this goes with this situation because last year, their offense was pretty much Ray Davis and then trying to figure it out otherwise.
Yeah, a lot of high ceiling with him, and I think something that could help him unlock the high ceiling is that receiving core with Barryon Brown and Dane Key and Jamori Macklin, and we're going to highlight Dane Key here. He was second on the team with 519 yards as a true freshman. Led the Wildcats this past year with 631 yards. He separates really, really well. He's actually 6'3", so he's a tall receiver, but separates really, really well. 88th percentile separation rate over the last 2 years at about a 79% open target rate. So really, really good separator. Large catch radius. Has caught 56% of his contested targets in his career as well. He should be one of the favorite targets for Brock Vandergriff next year as a big receiver who can get open and also go up and get it as well. I think Dane Key, I know Barryon Brown gets a lot of the hype in that receiver room, but Dane Key has arguably been their most consistent performer in that receiving core right now.
Absolutely, and they're going to need it. But I'll tell you what, they won't need it as much as some other teams need it because they got some really good players on defense, and they got a freak show down on the defensive line that we've talked about a lot. You've gotten to interview, check out Max's interview with this guy, Deone Walker, man. This is whatever you want to call him, Godzilla, the freak show, the animal, whatever nickname you can come up with for it. Maybe we should have a contest. But I'll tell you what, he's going to remind NFL scouts of Chris Jones. He's got get off. He's got length. He's got a freakish level of finesse. Last year, he played around 350. This year, down in the 330s. And I'll tell you what, this is a 330-something pound guy that's convinced he can run a 4.6. This is the guy that keeps opposing coaches up at night, man. How in the world do we block, or maybe we just don't block, Deone Walker? He can take games over from the inside. We talk about maybe a Mason Graham or Howard Cross or some great players. This is as freakish a player as there is as any position in the country. Anybody. Deone Walker could be a top 10 pick next year, which is, I mean, you just don't get his level of size and athleticism together. Led the nation in interior pressures last year. Just an absolute freak show, and a guy we fully expect to be in the first round next year.
I mean, you mentioned the Chris Jones, kind of mold that teams could look at him and say that, man, and that's the best D tackle in the league right now. So as freaky gets, man, he is a nuts player, nuts human being. And yeah, he said 4.6 is when he wants to run in the 40-yard dash. For anyone who doesn't know, the record for a D tackle is 4.67 by Kalijah Cansey, who's about 70 pounds lighter than Deone Walker. So if he runs a 4.6, man, he could go in the top 5 of the NFL draft, if not higher than that, man. He could be as one of the biggest unicorns we've ever seen in the NFL draft. So check out that interview with him. He's a great kid and an unbelievable talent on the football field as well. What's the bottom line, Dalton? What should we expect from this Kentucky team? So like I said before, back-to-back 7 and 6 years. Are they going to be worse than that? Are they going to be better than that? Or do you think 7 and 6 is right around the range where you expect Kentucky to be next year?
It feels like right in about that range, right? Like they have enough talent to compete, especially defensively. They're going to play hard-nosed football because that's what Mark Stoops and them do. But it's the questions at quarterback and on the offensive line are a big problem when it comes to competing with the top teams, right? Like you saw them get off to a good start last year and then just got absolutely waxed in the Georgia game, and it kind of fell off from there. Huge question at quarterback, huge question up front for an offensive line that struggled last year and might not look significantly better. So they have pieces. They have a defense to keep them in ball games, but I think a bowl game is really going to be about where this thing maxes out.
Yeah, I think Kentucky's defense will be good enough by itself to get the team to a bowl game, but if they want to do more than that, Brock Vandergriff has to live up to his 5-star hype coming out of high school. But again, he's been on the bench for 3 years, so we really have no idea what this guy's going to look like as a full-time starter. I'm excited to see it, personally. There's some other 5-star quarterbacks who are going to get their first opportunities after many years sitting on the bench. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Brock Vandergriff can do as a former 5-star recruit, now in his 4th season of college football, finally getting a chance to be a starter. But he really is the key to all of this, man, because if he's really good, they could absolutely make a lot of noise in the SEC next year. But if not, this probably be about a bowl team, right, with how good that defense is. But that's what we got for our preview of the Kentucky Wildcats in our SEC previews right now. Again, we're doing this for every single one of the 70 Power 5 teams. So make sure you subscribe to the channel for more of these previews coming out very soon.